Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. To the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo Saranto Suchedoye Alahadi Samya Samputoje. Saranto Suchedoye Alahadi Samya Samputoje. So we do the opening verse together in Chinese. 无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。The unsurpassed, deep, profound, subtle, wonderful Dharma, in 100,000 million eons, is difficult to encounter. Now that I've come to receive and hold it within my sight and hearing, I vow to fathom the thus come one's true and actual meaning. So welcome everybody. What we'll start is with the reciting the title of the sutra, which you'll see is in the front of your book. So if everybody has a sutra text, the very front, recite it 7 times. Namo Da Fang Guang Vo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Ai Wei Bo Bu Sai Namo Da Fang Guang Vo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Ai Wei Bo Bu Sai Namo Da Fang Guang Vo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Hai Hui Fo Bu Sa. Namo Da Fang Guang Vo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Hai Wei Fo Bu Sai. Namo Da Fang Guang Vo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Hai Wei Fo Bu Sai. Namo Da Fang Guang Vo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Ai Wei Fo Bu Sai. Namo Da Fang Guang Vo Hua Yan Jing Hua Yan Hai Hui Fo Bu Sai. So, welcome everybody to today's sutra lecture. Tonight, we will be lecturing on the 5th ground of the Avatamsaka Sutra. This is the chapter, the 10 grounds chapter of the Avatamsaka Sutra. We're on the 5th ground, and we're on page 35. So this is a quick introduction. Tonight is September 7th. I believe it's the 6th Patriarch's Enlightenment Day, Nirvana Day. So it's a special day. And today is also Saturday, and we're here in Berkeley Monastery in Berkeley, California. So, and tonight Jing He Shi and myself will be, Jing Chuan will be lecturing.
So on page 35, where we left off last week with Dr. Marty Verhoeven, was So tonight we will begin with the second paragraph on page 35 with the word disciples of the Buddha. So in accord with tradition, we will first recite the sutra in Chinese and then we recite it once in English.
Okay, so for people who are not familiar with the Chinese pronunciation, what will happen is I will recite it first, and my pronunciation, I have to be honest, is not that accurate, but you can kind of follow, and you can get the sound of the sounds of the Chinese. Just as a note, if you see the little arrow going or the line going up, the sound goes up, and if you see a little like a bungee cord, it goes it's like and then if it goes downwards, it's like somebody's mad. They go kind of down, and then if you see it flat, it's So those are the tones in Chinese, and so that's I think the main thing to pay attention to.
And that concludes the lesson on Chinese pronunciation.
Okay.
Okay, put your palms together,
yeah,
please.
palms together. 佛子菩萨摩诃萨住此第五地仪，以善修菩提分法故，善经生信故，复转求上圣道故复转求上圣道故，随顺真如故，愿力所持故，于一切众生慈悯不舍故，积极福自助道故，精勤修习不喜故，出生善巧方便故，观察照明上上地故，受如来护念故，念自力所持故，得不退转心。
Continue having our palms together and we'll all read the English together. Disciples of the Buddha, once the Bodhisattva Mahasattva stays on the fifth ground, because he is good at the cultivation of the Bodhi-share dharmas, because he is good at purifying deep mindsets, because he further intensifies his quest for the progressively more supreme way, because he accords with true suchness, because it is upheld by the power of vows, because he feels kindness and empathy for every living being and never abandons them, because he gathers blessings and wisdom and the aids to the way, because he vigorously and diligently practices without rest, because he brings forth skill in means, because he contemplates and illumines the progressively higher grounds, because he receives the protective mindfulness of the thus-come ones, and because he recalls the strength of wisdom that maintains him. Thus, he gains a mindset that does not retreat.
Okay. So tonight's passage begins with disciples of the Buddha. So here to start out, for people who are maybe not familiar with the sutra, this is actually a discussion between, you can say, a Dharma request by Moon of Liberation Bodhisattva, who requests the Dharma from Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva. And so, in the tradition of Buddhism, the Dharma is spoken upon request. And so, very sincerely, just like we did a moment ago, Moon of Liberation Bodhisattva requests the Dharma from Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva to speak on the fifth ground. So Vajra Treasury Bodhisattva very kindly agrees which was not an easy task. If people remember in the very beginning of the sutra, they had to ask a number of times before Vajracharya Bodhisattva really was willing to explain it. And so it's something that's very precious. And so here, Vajracharya Bodhisattva says, disciples of the Buddha, once the Bodhisattva Mahasattva stays on the fifth ground. So Bodhisattva Mahasattva, so for people who might be new to the sutra, a Bodhisattva is a being who makes his vows, his aspirations to realize Buddhahood as well as to rescue living beings. So his heart is very expansive and very great. And the word Mahasattva, if people are familiar with Buddhism, there's a word Maha. We have the Mahayana. The first word Maha means great. So this is a great being. Sattva means being. So this is a great bodhisattva. Among bodhisattvas, this is a great bodhisattva. And he cultivates here on the fifth ground. And if people are new to this portion of the sutra, there are 10 grounds in this section. And it describes each level the bodhisattva goes through in his path to cultivation. And so now we're about, you say halfway through on the fifth ground. And that's the ground of difficult conquest. Want to say something? Okay.
So for some of you here, this might be your first time coming to terms with this text called the Buddha's Flower Garland Sutra of Great Expansive Teachings. In short, it's called the Avatamsaka Sutra, or the Flower Adornment Sutra. And what we just done, if we came from the beginning, is we had the sutra request, where the gentleman here circumambulated 3 times before the Buddhas and with the incense. And after that, there was a request for Dharma that was recited both in Chinese and in English. And then we also recited the name of the sutra 7 times. And all that is designed because the text before you here today is close to 3,000 years old. And it was the first sutra that the Buddha spoke when he was enlightened under the Bodhi tree. So when we come across a text that's that old and that has the wisdom of the Buddha, it requires a certain, the mind has to be a bit elastic compared to what we are normally used to when we encounter in our daily affairs. So the ceremony, the short ceremony just now, was designed to relax the mind and to calm the mind down so that the mind is able to accept the wisdom and the concepts and principles that we're about to encounter as we go through the sutra. So as my colleague, my Dhamma brother, that's a habit from my working days. My Dhamma brother, Jin Chuan Shi, just explained, disciples of the Buddha, the first sentence, once the Bodhisattva Mahasattva stays on the fifth ground. The reason why this paragraph starts off this way is because previously the Bodhisattva was still on the fourth ground. And if you look at the passage before, in order to get on the fifth ground, the Bodhisattva had to cultivate a list of 10 mindsets or views, or you could say skills, in order to reach the fifth ground. So he actually was successful in doing that. And we'll just run through quickly to give some context to the paragraph that will be following today. So the first one was a mindset of equality and purity towards the Dharma of the Buddhas of the past, towards the Buddhas of the future, towards the Buddha of the present. The fourth one, a mindset of equality and purity towards the precepts. So they're all having a mindset of equality and purity, the precepts towards the mind, from casting out views, doubts, and regrets. Purity in the knowledge of what is and what is not the way. Purity in cultivating knowledge and perspectives. A mindset of equality and purity in making increasingly excellent contemplation of all Bodhi-shared dharmas. And the last one, in teaching each and every living being. So I'll just quickly explain what it means to have a mindset of equality and purity. The one that stand out to me the most was the fourth one, a mindset of equality and purity towards the precepts. And I'll borrow the Venerable Master's explanation about what this means. It's explained that the Bodhisattva attitude towards the precepts is that he holds the precepts on behalf of all beings who are unable to maintain the precepts. Because he knows that the precepts are really good. It's just like if you drive on a road, you have the lines to keep you within the road. And anyone who drives would know that if you stray off the lines, you will get into an accident, or you can harm yourself or harm other people. So naturally, you follow the lines. So the precepts can be seen as in life, lines on the road as you travel on this journey called life to make sure that you are safe. Unfortunately, not many people understand the concept about precepts. So what the Bodhisattva does is that he holds the precepts not for himself, but in his heart, he says, I am going to hold the precepts for all those who are unable to hold the precepts. And when he does that, then he transfers merit? He transfers the merit to all the people that he's holding them for. So that just gives you an idea about where the Bodhisattva is coming from when he cultivates all these different mindsets of equality and purity.
Just to add, so my feeling from when I listen to that is that you can imagine the Bodhisattva's mind and how expansive it is. He's not, by not doing it for himself, the mind can be pure and equal. Because most of the time, our mind kind of goes up and down, kind of left and right, kind of starts discriminating, because it has a kind of a selfishness to it, has a kind of a calculation to it. But if your heart, or in the Bodhisattva's mind here, I can only kind of guess because it's not my experience, the Bodhisattva. But in terms of just my sense of the kind of the expansive heart of the Bodhisattva, when you have that care for all living beings, then nothing really is a problem. If somebody or something happens that's not in accord with your wishes, the heart is already so broad, it doesn't affect you. It's like a drop of sand in the ocean. It's just, there's nothing happens. It's just equal and pure. So that's why my feeling is that the expansiveness of that heart is encompassing.
The Bodhisattva has a really big heart.
Yeah. So that's the heart that he has as he's entering this next list, which you just read, which was the practices that the Buddha or the Bodhisattva will undergo here on the fifth ground. And I think the key thing to look at in terms of the structure of this paragraph is at the very end, it says that because he does all these various things when he's on the fifth ground, he has a mind that does not retreat, which I think is a really important concept. I believe that for many of us who are trying to practice a spiritual path, not retreating is a great would be something very wonderful, because oftentimes when we're cultivating the path, we really see our bad habits, or we get to a kind of a little bit of a depression, or kind of like a kind of a doldrum, almost kind of like a place of practice where things are no longer so exciting, maybe in the Dharma, or maybe we're just having difficulty internally. We have a sense of retreating. But here, the Bodhisattva is cultivating where he does not retreat. And all these things, as a list, show how he does contribute to him not retreating. So here we get to see what the Bodhisattva does. But here as also a reflection for us is, maybe if we're thinking, well, maybe we have a heart that might retreat. Well, we can look at this list, and maybe parts of this list will make sense to us, to encourage us to cultivate a mind that doesn't retreat, a mindset that does not retreat. So I think that's a really key idea as we go through this list, to see what the Bodhisattva does, but also look in our own hearts and see, oh, can I cultivate this? Can I do this so that I will have a mind that just moves forward and without any doubts, without any sense of I want to go backwards because I feel I'm not confident enough, or I don't have the right skills, or this is just too hard for me. He just moves forward.
So basically, you could say that the Bodhisattva in his journey through life, he has gained a certain kind of strength that enables him to stick to his decision. And the strength propels him on, and he relies on this strength. So right now, this paragraph has 12, lists down 12 items that the Bodhisattva draws his strength from. So the first one, it says, because he is good at the cultivation of the Bodhi shared dharmas. The term Bodhi shared dharmas means here what is called, commonly known in Buddhism as the 37 wings, 37 shares of enlightenment. There's a list of 37 qualities that a person can cultivate.
Well, we can just point it out so people know where to look if they want to. But if you look at the fourth ground, say starting on page 8, this is quite a while back, or 7, page 7, and it just goes through to page 9, page 11, keeps going on to page 13. All those list the 37, you can say, parts of enlightenment, wings of awakening, depending on how you translate it. And it starts with the contemplation of the body and the contemplation of right effort. So this is a list that's extremely useful for cultivation because it outlines what to do. And the fourth ground, as people maybe remember, or if you weren't here, the fourth ground was about vigor, about practicing with energy. And so this is what the Bodhisattva did at that time, was he practiced these 37 Bodhi shares with vigor. And so here, the Bodhisattva is still cultivating these. He becomes good at it. That's what it says. He becomes good at cultivating these. And so now he's on the fifth ground. So it kind of, you can see how it connects. So before he cultivated these dharmas with vigor, and now he's here on the fifth ground and he's skilled at it. He's not just cultivating, he's got some mastery of it.
When the first time I encountered this text, I always thought the Bodhisattva Mahasattva was a great being in some far, far away land. And he had all these special abilities and special powers. And that this text was for someone like him. And that I had no connection with it. I didn't dare think that I could actually use this text as instructions to cultivate. But the more I read and the more I understood, and the more advice I got from the monks and I knew, I realized that, for example, like the 37 shares of enlightenment, cultivation comes from the mind. Cultivation is not something that we look outside, that we can get from outside. Cultivation is all about looking at your thoughts on a moment-to-moment basis. And this is what the Bodhisattva is doing. And the first thing that he did, because he's good at the cultivation of the Bodhi-shared dharmas, there are books called the 37 Wings to Enlightenment, and that book is actually used by monks to cultivate. We use that to reflect upon what our mind is doing at every particular moment. And a lot of lay people, common people, use that book as well. The book, you can say, the 37 Shares of Enlightenment are kind of like a mirror that when you read it, it reflects what your mind is going through. And you use that to look at your mind and says, is my mind doing this? Is this wholesome or is this not wholesome? Or should my mind be doing this? Or am I doing something else? So as we go through this text as well, you have to remember that the Bodhisattva Mahasattva may cultivate this at a level suitable to where he is. But it also means that it really applies to us as well. Because at every moment we can look at our own thoughts. So having said that, if you look at the next line, because he is good at purifying deep mindsets. So what happens to the Bodhisattva from the fourth ground moving on to the fifth ground? He's constantly looking at his own mind. And when that happens and he goes on the fifth ground, he encounters deeper states of his mind that arises. So you could say that he's meditating, or even if he's working, his mind is really still and is always being mindful of his thought patterns and his habitual patterns. So as his mind gets more still and more still from the fourth ground to the fifth ground, he's able to see more of how his mind works. So that was what I understand, purifying deep mindsets. His mind becomes deeper and he's able to see more habits habitual patterns of thinking that he has, that he can purify.
Because he further intensifies his quest for the progressively more supreme way. So let's take a look at the Chinese. It's Fu Zuan Qiu Sang Sen Dao Gu. So here, the supreme way refers to the Buddha way. He's here trying to realize Buddhahood, and he has an aspiration to realize Buddhahood. So you could say the Bodhisattva has this direction to his cultivation, and as he's on this process, he might meet difficulties or obstacles, but he just keeps going. He doesn't let it deter him. He doesn't let it. For instance, if we're meeting a difficulty in life, we could say, "Well, I'm gonna just retreat. I'm gonna, God, this cultivation is too difficult. Living in a monastery is just too difficult." But you say, "Oh, I meet this difficulty," but rather than retreat from it, you actually move forward with more strength. There's a sense of more. I don't know the intensity, but it's like you move forward with more strength because you see, "Oh, I need to apply more energy to this." And so here the Bodhisattva knows where he's going. He says, "Oh, it's difficulty, but that just means I got to work harder."
He wants to improve himself constantly and wants to get better.
And so I think that's really, you can see how that connects to a mind that doesn't retreat. Because if you have that kind of attitude, I meet a difficulty, well, that just means I have to work harder. It really kind of contributes to this energy of just constantly moving forward, not going backward, just day by day taking it through a process. And you don't fear obstacles. You don't fear difficulty. You actually really, you don't go look for difficulties. For sure, when you cultivate, difficulties will come. But when they come, you're not scared of it. You just say, this is just part of the practice.
Actually, the next two lines really put in context of what we just read. The next line says, because he is upheld by the power of vows. And following that, it says, because he feels kindness and empathy for every living being and never abandons them. So his quest for the progressive, more supreme way, if you've been following this text, you would have realized that the Bodhisattva in his quest for Buddhahood is not doing it for himself. His motivation is solely to help other living beings. That's his sole motivation for going through all these hardships. So why would he want to be progressively in the most supreme way, or in language I can understand? Why does he want to achieve Buddhahood? It's because so that he has more skills to help living beings along the way. And that's the only reason why he does that. So that's why the Bodhisattva makes vows to help beings, and we'll come back to the power of vows once we finish this paragraph. So I won't elaborate on vows right now. But I'll speak a bit about, that's why he feels kindness and empathy for every living being and never abandons them. So if you understand this, then you will understand the whole motivation behind the Bodhisattva. And as we go on through the text, if you constantly keep that in mind, then that will frame the intention of the Bodhisattva clearly.
Just to quickly add, we may have missed a line there, because he accords with true suchness. Actually, Heng Sure and myself had a long discussion this afternoon when we were both going, what is true suchness? It's something that I have to say, at least myself, I don't really know that well, because it's not my experience. But from what I understand, it points to the way things are. So in this way, you could say the Bodhisattva accords with the way things are. He's not out of sync with reality. He sees things as they truly are. And he lives by that. He lives by how things really are. So as Heng Sure just said, he talks about the vows, and he talks about the kindness and empathy for every living being, and never abandons them. For me, that's what makes the Avatamsaka Sutra so inspiring, is because the heart of the Bodhisattva doesn't renounce anybody. He doesn't renounce even beings who are hateful or hurt him or are don't listen to him, or maybe even scold him for helping them. The Bodhisattva here does not abandon any of them, does not abandon any living being. And so, because I think in my own process, sometimes I want to give up on somebody because they're so difficult, and I go, no, we're in the Bodhisattva's path. We have to help living beings. Or I look at myself sometimes, I go, gosh, I really can't help myself. I'm just so not up to this task. And I have to think of myself as a living being, and so I can't give up on myself either. And you can see how that also relates to not retreating. If you don't give up on yourself, you won't retreat. Because you always have a faith that, somebody, myself included, will help me along, will bring us through this process of cultivation, ultimately to Buddhahood. Okay, the next line, we have, because he gathers blessings and wisdom, and he aids to the way. For those who are familiar with Buddhist terminology, or just for instance, say the Buddha, he is seen as the doubly perfected one. And that's because he's perfect in blessings and wisdom. Liang Zu Zun. Actually, in the very early days of translation, they translated that as the doubly footed one, because the Zu is actually the Chinese word for foot, but also it means full or complete. So I know Venerable Master pointed that out and had a good laugh of the early translations. But here it means blessings and wisdom. He's perfect in blessings and wisdom. So in our cultivation, we're trying to perfect both of them, not just lean towards one side. There's an image in Buddhism about, say, somebody who just cultivates blessings, and someone who just cultivates blessings ends up becoming like a huge elephant with a necklace of pearls. What that means is, he's very blessed. He has a huge, a lot of blessings. He has these pearls. He's a blessed life, but he doesn't have very much wisdom. Doesn't really know what to do with it. And they say a person who cultivates wisdom but no blessing is like an arhat with an empty alms bowl. There's no one making offerings to him, and he can't really go out and help people because he doesn't have that connection with living beings. And so for us who strive or aspire to the wisdom and blessings of the Buddha, we need to go on both. And blessings are cultivated by what? By doing good, by giving to other people, by putting other people's first. And wisdom is cultivated by, here we get a chance to study the sutras, to meditate, to hold the precepts. And so by doing that, we develop wisdom. Okay, the next one?
My understanding of gathering blessings, because we already established throughout the text that the Bodhisattva does not cultivate for himself. So my understanding of why he would want to gather blessings, I think the closest example the first example I can think of would be Bill Gates, who has a huge bank account. And what does he do? He tries his best to give it away to projects and to charity that will benefit people. So you could say that a Bodhisattva is like that. The reason why he wants to gather blessings is so that he has the ability to help people. And why he wants wisdom, so that he knows that when he helps people, he helps them in a manner that is actually useful and helpful to them. And it's not a blind way of helping someone.
Okay, so next one is, because he vigorously and diligently practices without rest. So we've just finished the fourth ground, which is about vigor. But here on the fifth ground, he is still vigorous. He doesn't let go of his vigor. For us also cultivating the path, I think people know that vigor crosses over laziness. And being lazy sometimes is very appealing. In a way, the monastic form is very helpful because, you're I want to say forced to, but just part of your natural daily schedule is getting up very early and having a full day of practice ahead of you, which makes it very makes vigorous. A very full life. It makes a very vigorous life. And sometimes you want to rest, but because there's the form, it kind of supports you in that. So vigor is definitely something that I found coming to Buddhism, I'm always amazed about. I can tell a story. This is a kind of real brief story about vigor. I remember we had a maybe it was the 20th or 25th anniversary of the Siddhartha Buddhas at the Siddhartha Buddhas, and so as people know who've worked at the Siddhartha Buddhas, when these big events happen, it's almost everything's at the last moment. You know, everybody's people are at the 50th anniversary of the Realm Master coming to the West have that experience. But so we're putting all the event together and putting up all the speakers and putting up the tent and all the various things needed for the event to occur. And so and then we finished finally the day before the event happens. And I'm like, wow, I'm so tired, you know, working all day long. And so the final day we chant the Universal Worthies exhortation, right? The kind of exhortation, you know, don't be lax, you know, cultivate vigorously. Okay. But 9:30, I'm like, all my thought is, I'm going to bed. Whew. Tomorrow I have another day of ceremonies. You know, I wake up at 3:30 and okay, so at that point, as I'm walking out, one of the nuns comes around the side and say, who's going to watch the speakers? I say, what? The speakers? Because if people, the event before, we have these speakers in the main tent. And actually the year before, they were stolen. Some kids basically came and were just kind of playing around, took the speakers, and then later they found them farther down the road. And so I guess the concern was, well, the speakers are, you know, they weren't, now we high up on the tent, but now they're low. I mean, at that time they were low on the ground so people could pick it up. So my thought was, I'm going to sleep. That's not my job. So I went to my dorm. And so the next morning I wake up, I'm going off to the morning ceremony, you know, at 3:30, 3:40, and I'm getting there, and then I see these 2 or 3 kids there, and they're the high school kids, and they're just sitting there in front of the Buddha hall, looking at the tent. I'm like, why are you guys here? And they said, well, we're watching the speakers. I says, what? You guys are watching the speakers? You know, I said, yeah. We have loudspeakers. These are these big speakers. And they said, yeah, because, you know, we were just kind of playing around at like 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning, and we came out here, and you know who was sitting here? I said, who? He said, the abbot. I was like, the abbot was sitting there? I'm like, no way. He worked with me all day long yesterday for the whole entire day. And then that evening, I'm like, so he just sat there and just met. I'm like, wow. And then later they said, when he came for morning ceremony, they said, what he told them is, I appreciate you guys. I mean, I borrowed some of your blessings last night. I was like, that's vigor. That's real vigor. So that was for me very inspiring when I was first starting to volunteer at the city, because I was like, wow, that's really vigor. Because for me, I was so ready to go to rest, get some rest.
That was 10 years ago.
So the next one is, because he brings forth skill and means. People who are familiar with Buddhist terms, the skill and means is the Chinese word 方便. Here, yeah, 方便, 善巧方便. In Sanskrit, upaya. And this idea of skill and means is actually really central to the Bodhisattva's practices in Buddhism, because the Bodhisattva teaches according to the potentials of living beings. He's skillful in teaching living beings what they need at the right time, the right place. And so here the Bodhisattva is teaching right on. So, okay, the next one. You want to do the next one?
Because he contemplates and illumines the progressively higher grounds. What this means is that as he's on the 5th ground, he's also aware that what lies ahead of him is a 6, 7, 8, 9, and then on to Buddhahood. So while he's cultivating on the 5th ground, he also has in his sights, just like a hunter, he has in his, the crosshairs, and he's aiming for the long run. But he's also, how would I say, he has a long-term view, but he's also really practical. That's how I see it. So while he's on the 5th ground, he's keeping in mind, he's setting the ground. He knows that he's setting the ground for the 6, 7, and progressive grounds. And then the next one, if anyone has any questions at any time, feel free to raise up your hands. If it's too difficult, we just ignore you. But if we can, we'll try our best to answer.
Or we can ask somebody else to help answer the question too in the audience.
Yeah, I'll just feign having a hearing problem. And then moving on. Because he receives the protective mindfulness of the dust come ones. And this is one of the reasons why he has a mindset does not retreat. He knows that the dust come ones, which is another name for the Buddhas, is always mindful of him. Basically, I guess it's how, say, a child is always, you can always rely on the comfort that either your aunt, your grandmother, your grandfather, or your mom or dad is always looking out for you, and you can go to them for comfort, or someone that you look up to, like a teacher. In my case, one of my ex-bosses when I was working was someone like that. He could always, whenever I had any problems with work, he would always be there. He would not judge. He would listen and try his best to solve the problem, even if I was in the wrong. So anyone you can look up to and rely on. And the next one.
I think that one's actually really important, also with the idea that the mindset that does not retreat, because as an experience in cultivation is oftentimes having like spiritual advisors, or we call them good and wise advisors, supporting one is really helpful. So here, so what I mean by that is exactly what Heng Sure just said, is that he had like a boss basically watching out for him, caring about him. For us on the cultivation path, there's a lot of people who have our best interests at heart, who are trying to help us. And my experience is all we have to do is connect, kind of look and remember to look to them for support. And then they're really able to help us. So the story that's given in the sutras, particularly the Shurangama Sutra, explains the practice of mindfulness of the Buddha. And it's exactly how Heng Sure mentioned. It's explained like a mom. The Buddha is like a mom who always is mindful and caring and wants the best for her child. But the child, sadly, has run away and has forgotten all about the mother. And so the Buddha, or in this analogy, the mother, is unable to help the child as much as she hopes to help him. But if the child can remember the mother, then the Buddha can help as much as necessary and can help fully. And so this is a kind of a very, I would say, very down-to-earth an example of this idea, is that if we're mindful of the Buddha, it kind of taps us into the protection and the mindfulness of the Buddhas have for us. And even on a more mundane level, even with the people around us, good friends, good teachers, to know that many people actually have our best interests at heart. And if we can have that, looking to that, we connect with that, and that protects us, especially on this journey in cultivation, from retreating, because these people are all wishing for our best. We're not just loners cultivating a spiritual path, on our own. We have tremendous spiritual strength supporting us on this path every moment of the day, every moment, every second, every thought even. And if we can just remember that, it helps us.
So since there are so many stories being told, I would like to tell my own story as well. About 3 hours ago, I got a Skype message from someone in Canada. So the both of us just got ordained as monks last month. Was it last month? A few weeks ago.
No, yeah, 1 month exactly,
1 month.
Almost. August 9th.
And my mom came all the way from Malaysia to visit me and to see me getting ordained. Probably the thought in her mind was, at last something good has come out of my rascal son. And so she left for Canada about a week and a half ago, and I have not seen her since. I have not seen her for about 4 years, since I came from Malaysia. So when she came, her health wasn't really that great, and she managed to see a doctor and she got some medication. So the Skype message read, "Hello, my name is so-and-so. I'm your mother's friend in Canada. Your mother wants you to know that she is fine and you do not need to worry about her." So my first instinctive thought was, I'm not worried. But I did think about my mom because of her health. So I replied the Skype message, and I was able to speak to my mom for a few minutes. And she was really happy. And she's all the way in Canada, and all she wants is for me not to worry about my mom, about her. So that's what moms are.
Okay, the next one is, because he recalls the strength of wisdom that maintains him, thus he gains a mindset that does not retreat. So here, it's wisdom that allows him to not retreat. It's something that he sees things really clearly. It's not just from believing in something. It's not just saying, oh, I believe in the Dharma and therefore I won't retreat. Actually, later on, I found there was a really interesting passage which talks about how the Bodhisattva, although that was a slightly different passage, I won't maybe go into it, but here though, it says basically the Bodhisattva sees things with wisdom, has wisdom to rely on, and then doesn't retreat. And my experience with wisdom is that that's when you actually see through something. I think one analogy of the precepts, samadhi, and wisdom is that precepts are like it's like if you imagine the afflictions and the defilements as like bandits or thieves, the precepts kind of identify them. Oh, so that's an affliction. That's a thief. So you kind of at least can see them. And then the samadhi is like you tie them up. And then the wisdom, although we don't want to have wisdom, we don't want killing, but the wisdom is actually like you actually cut them, you kind of kill them. They're gone. You get rid of them. You compassionately have transformed them into something else, so they're no longer there. And then you naturally don't retreat. I don't know if you can tell your story about the bleach. I think that's really the bleach. Want to do that here? Your story? Want me to tell you? I think just this afternoon, Jing Hezhi gave me a really good example that I thought explained the idea of not retreating in a way I've never thought about it before. That made a lot of sense. So if you can share it now, it would be great.
Yeah, in our preparations for tonight's lecture, because we haven't been doing this very long, in case you can't really tell, because we're that good, but this is probably our third time. Yeah, so you can't see because we're sitting far away, but my hands is actually shaking. So we came to this part, thus he gains a mindset does not retreat. And we were discussing that. And one of the things, the ideas that popped into my mind, kind of like out of nowhere, because we were talking about, say, if you're an alcoholic. I used to drink before I took the precepts, and I really enjoyed drinking because I didn't know any better, and it was kind of like a social lubricant. And when I tried to quit, it was really tough because I had already developed that habit. Every time my friends went out and I would go out with them, they would be drinking. And the smart aleck in the group would always just put a drink right in front of me. Here, there you go, knowing that I had made a resolve not to drink anymore. So in my mind, I was always torn. Part of me really wanted to drink, and the other part of me said, no, I'm determined not to drink. So the analogy I came up with for how the Bodhisattva would probably be, he probably sees the alcohol like bleach. You never ever think about wanting to drink bleach. It's not part of your thought system. You see bleach, you never even, it's inconceivable that you would even have the thought of how does that taste like? You just your mind just doesn't move there. So I guess that's how the Bodhisattva is when he has a mindset does not retreat. Even the idea of retreat does not figure in his thought process.
Yeah, it's not even an option. That's why I think that example for me really like had me see it in a different way, because it's like he doesn't even harbor that thought. Especially for myself, who has always had lots of doubts about myself. It's like he doesn't even have a thought of doubt. He doesn't even have a thought, because that just doesn't make any sense. So the idea of, would you ever drink bleach? No. That thought would just never enter your mind.
Yeah. Are you dumb? Yeah.
Because, I mean, also it's kind of wisdom, because you obviously know that'll probably kill you, so you wouldn't want to drink it. So I thought that was a very kind of an interesting contemplation for us when we see difficulty, is just looking, this is just kind of like drinking bleach. So, yeah.
Okay. So earlier on we said that we would revisit the middle of the passage that says, because it is upheld by the power of vows. The reason why we want to do that is when most people think about Buddhism and what cultivation is all about, the first thing that pops to mind, especially in America, is meditation. And a lot of people that I know, when they meditate, all they want is a bit of clarity and peace of mind, and they just sit there. And some of them have been doing that for 15, 20 years, and they're still after the same thing. They just meditate because they just want to cope with the stresses of life. But the mechanism of how vows work is actually really, really powerful in Buddhism. In fact, if you don't have vows, you could say that you don't have any direction. And if you're in a car, you're just driving around and you don't know where you end up in. Circles or squares or up and down or around the world, you just be driving. So how do we make sense of vows? Well, let's look at what we normally know about vows. I don't have any personal experience, but because I've watched a lot of movies, there's marriage vows, right? Everyone knows when you marry someone in your ceremony, how do you say it? You make vows? You take vows? You take marriage vows. And, do you so-and-so take this lady to be your lawful wedded wife? And then so on and so on. Do they still say till death? Do you part? Is that still mentioned in contemporary weddings? They do say that? Okay. So that's what we know about vows. Another perspective about what vows are is I always imagine, say, a super athlete who's training for the Olympics. And he knows that he has a really good chance of winning the gold. And he spent the last 4 years or the last 8 years training for that one single day, that one single event, that one moment that will make it all worth it. So I always imagine this athlete on the night before. He's trying to calm his mind. Say he's a sprinter or whatever, he's a boxer, a swimmer. And then all his friends come to him, his family members, say, hey, let's go out. There's this really good restaurant that has really good food, the best cake you ever eaten in your life. And after that, let's go to a movie. It's only showing for tonight. It's your favorite movie for me would probably be something like, if there's a new Matrix or Lord of the Rings, something like that. And then after that, we'll go out for a party, and all your friends will be there, and you'll have such a great time. It will be the best time of your life. And I always imagine this athlete just saying, no, I've worked so hard for the last 4 years, 8 years. All I want to do is rest my mind, be calm, and prepare myself to get the goal tomorrow. Whatever you say will not tempt me from my goal. So I always seen a vow as kind of having that kind of power. You know, there's a strength to making a vow. So a vow is kind of like a promise that you make. If I didn't make a vow, I wouldn't be sitting here right now, wearing these really fancy clothes. You know, you have to see my socks. It's really
not so fancy.
not so fancy. Yeah, but in my mind, these are like the fanciest clothes I can wear right now. And so the power of vows. And it is said, the power of your vow can be measured by how broad your mind is. So if you make a vow that encompasses, say you want to benefit all living beings, I can only imagine how powerful that vow will be, and how it could, how would I say, see you through the darkest moments of your life. For example, when I was ordained, someone asked me, said, "Hey, is it really hard to be a monk?" And I said, "Yeah, kind of. There's kind of a lot of hardships in becoming a monk." And his next question was, "Wow, you must really suffer a lot." And I thought about it, and I quickly answered, actually, no, because hardships are external. You know, hardships are the environment, but suffering comes from the mind. So it doesn't. So if you look at it from a purely objective view, hardship does not necessarily correlate with suffering at all, because you can control if you suffer through your mind. So I guess the Bodhisattva, if you've been reading the text, the Bodhisattva goes through all kinds of hardship. You know, you can imagine him meditating for hours at a time. He holds the precepts. That means he denies himself the usual pleasures that most people take for granted. He's constantly looking at his mind. He's not out there enjoying his senses. So why would he want to do that? That's because he's powered by the power of his vows. He does it so that he can get skills to save living beings. And that's why vows are really, really important when you want to cultivate. So one of my best experiences in the city of 10,000 Buddhas at a retreat was every year we have this 3-week really intensive session called the 10,000 Buddhas Bowing Repentance. And what happens is, you go into the Buddha hall every day for 3 weeks. You recite the name of one Buddha, and then you make one vow. And then you stand up. And then you recite the name of another Buddha, and you make one vow, and you stand up. The first time I did that, I thought this would be a piece of cake, because I was reasonably fit, and I saw a lot of old ladies in the Buddha hall. I was like, no, if they can do it, there are a lot of them. I said, if they can do it, why can't I? By the third day, I was ready to give up, because the pain in my legs was just unbearable. And you could not escape, because you're there with everyone, and you're bowing you bow for how many hours? Is it 5 hours a day? 6?
I think 6 hours.
Yeah, you bow for 6 hours.
7 to 10 and 1 to 4.
And the pace can be really slow sometimes, or it can be, sometimes it's quick. Over here. And yeah, so it was just the third day, and I was telling myself, how am I going to endure this for the next 3 weeks? 17, 18 more days. And then someone told me, he said, you know what you should do? You're buying for yourself, right? And I said, of course I'm buying for myself. He said, why don't you bow for the people, like, you know, kind of like your parents, or you can bow for the people who are not here right now, or the people who are working in the city. And what he said really made sense. So I thought, okay, I'll give it a try. And with that, something changed in my mind. I'm not sure what. The pain was still there. The pain didn't go away, but my mind could cope. It didn't really seem over here again, not there, over here. And my mind could just cope with the pain. And the pain disappeared by maybe the 6th day. And by the 2nd week, by the time it was over, I felt really macho again. I said, hey, I can do this for the next 3 weeks. But secretly, I was really glad that it was over. So that's my personal experience with the power vows. And throughout my understanding of the sutras that I've read, it's really amazing because the Buddha's close disciples, the bodhisattvas, the main bodhisattvas that we know in Buddhism, can all trace throughout countless lifetimes to the moment they make that single vow that made them say, I want to be a Buddha, or I want to help all living beings. And because of that one vow that they made, they eventually became who they wanted to be. And when they got enlightened, they could see how that vow carried them from life to life. So making a vow is not a trivial matter. It doesn't mean that I just want to do this, I want to do that. It means from the deepest recesses of your heart, you make a commitment saying, I really want to help all living beings. And you commit to that. And it takes a bit of practice because, like, for me, I really don't know what I'm doing when I'm making a vow. I'm just fooling around with a concept in my mind. But I hope that one day, just like in my vowing experience, something clicks. And then I get the strength then to be able to, if I encounter a patch of darkness in my cultivation or in my life, or when I'm faced with difficulties that I may not have the strength to cope with myself, that I can rely on something like that. And one of the stories that I'd like to share, and this is a really famous story that every Buddhist should know. Yeah, it happened when Ananda also once made a vow, by the way, when he was just a common person like me, like you. This was in the time and place. The sutra always says, in a time uncountable, inconceivable, thank you, eons ago. Do you have any Star Wars fans here? You know Star Wars, when they always like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, kind of like that. So a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, Ananda, when he was someone else, he saw someone attending to the Buddha during that time. And he was so moved by this person's sincerity in serving the Buddha. He made a vow. He said, one day I shall be like that person. I do want to serve the Buddha. Because apparently the Buddha, if you were to be able to encounter one, is really majestic. The Buddha has 32 physical hallmarks, they say. That, like for example, his skin is like purple gold. His teeth are really even, nice and white. He has the chest of a lion. And that's all I can remember for now, so I'll carry on. So apparently if you meet a Buddha, he's really majestic and he's really awe-inspiring. So Ananda, when he saw that someone could actually be in a position to serve the Buddha, he made that vow. And then when he became Ananda, he got the opportunity to serve the Buddha, all through the power of that vow that he made uncountable eons ago in the galaxy far, far away. So at this point, when Ananda was serving Shakyamuni Buddha, the Buddha of a present time, he saw that Shakyamuni Buddha had an especially nice countenance to him. And he knew something was up. He knew something was up with the Buddha. And then he asked the Buddha, he said, "Oh Buddha, why do you radiate such, I don't know, such light, radiance?" And that set the tone for the Buddha to explain to him about Amitabha Buddha. So the Buddha said, in a far, far galaxy a long, long time ago, he said at the time of Dipankara Buddha, after the Dipankara Buddha went into passing, there followed 53 Buddhas, and he named each and every Buddha after Dipankara Buddha. And finally, the 53rd Buddha was a Buddha called Lokesh Varaja Tathagata. And I know in Sanskrit, Raja means like king. And during that time, Amitabha Buddha was just a common person. Actually, he wasn't that common. He was a king. But he was so moved by the teachings of the Buddha, he decided to be a monk. And then he went to the Buddha for instructions. And one of the things that the Buddha did, so when he became a monk, he got the name, Amitabha Buddha was named Dipankara. No, that's the name of the Buddha.
His name was
Dhammakaya.
Dhammakaya.
Dhammakaya. Sorry. So the Buddha, through his spiritual abilities, showed Amitabha Buddha, who was just a monk at that time, all the different Buddha lands. And when he saw that, an idea appeared in his mind. He made 48 great vows. And these vows are really, really great. There's a sutra called the Larger Sutra on Amitayas, and I suggest all of you read that. It's really accessible. In that sutra, he lists down 48 vows. And one of the vows he said was, he shall go to all the Buddha lands, and like a great architect, he would pick out all the best things about every Buddha land, and he will combine them into one great land. And he will call it the Western Pure Land. And this happened a long, long, long time ago. And it took him a long time to become Amitabha and to fulfill his vows, his 48 great vows. And his vows are really great. For example, he says that, I vow that any being who wants to come to my land will be reborn in my land. So any one of us here, if we want to make a vow ourselves to be reborn in the Western Pure Land, we will be reborn in the Western Pure Land. But why do we want to be reborn in the Western Pure Land? That's where his other 47 vows come in. He said, if any human comes here, they will never retreat. They will never fall back into the evil past. If any being comes here, they won't even hear, his land is so pure that there doesn't even exist the term for evil. That means you won't encounter any evil at all. And if you want to see roughly what the Pure Land looks like, if you look up above me to that stained glass above, that's Amitabha Buddha. And that's a depiction of what the Pure Land looks like. There are birds that are created through Amitabha's vows. They're not, but my understanding is they're not actually like real birds. That means they're not born because of their karma, but they're magically transformed birds. That when they sing the sounds of the Dharma. I don't really know what that means, but that's what it says in the sutra. You're born from a lotus flower. That means you're not born through a body. What you wish for, you will get. So it's a really amazing place. So from here, what I can understand is that vows, especially if you make great vows, it doesn't just help you in your cultivation. But when you realize your vows, then people like us, people like me, can rely on those vows as well. And it is said in the sutra, when Shakyamuni Buddha was explaining Amitabha's vows, Amitabha actually appeared in front of Ananda. So he had like 2 Buddhas in stereo right in front of him. And just one would be good enough, but he had 2 Buddhas in front of him. And that's why Amitabha Buddha is still relied upon up to this time because of the power of his vows. So his vows not only made him become a Buddha, but he also enabled almost anyone who understands what Mahayana Buddhism is all about, who follows what they call the Pure Land school, to want to be reborn in Amitabha's Pure Land. And the way to do that is, according to the power of his vows, which is by reciting Amitabha's name. So how that works, as I understand, when you recite Amitabha's name, so if you go to CDTB, you probably find someone sitting down there saying Amitofo, Amitofo, Amitofo. And how that works is by reciting that, you're replacing your habitual thoughts with a seed of Amitabha. That means you could say they're actually purifying your mind. And there's also the mechanism of how that plants seeds in your eight consciousness, and how that, just like a power of vows, is like a boat. Vows is described as a boat that carries you on as you transition from one physical body to your next life. Instead of being dragged along by your karma, you are instead ferried on a boat of vows. That's how powerful vows are. And that's why if you make a far-reaching vow and your vow is really wide and encompasses all living beings, that vow has the power to, how would I say, to protect you from any undesirable situations that or karma that may arise. Because that vow, if you really make it well, stays in your mind all the time. So you're constantly aware of your vow. So when you pass on, your mind, no matter in what state it will be, will revert back to that vow that you make. And that vow will guide you through the darkness or the light, I'm not sure, I don't remember, of when you transition into hopefully the pure land or your next body or rebirth in the heavens. Yeah.
Any general questions or thoughts? People have any questions about the sutra or anything that was discussed? Might also maybe give a couple reflections on vows in general. So there's the vows that of Amitabha Buddha that Heng Sure described that are pretty far-reaching. I know that when I first encountered those vows and those ideas, they were way beyond what my mind was capable of absorbing. But I found to start with vows is to really look at my own commitments in life. So I have the bodhisattvas and the Buddhas kind of as models or templates. Say this is the spirit, this is the energy, this is the heart of the bodhisattva. These are the kind of vows from the most ultimate, the most you could say the grandest vision of the Dharma, what to do, what you can do with the mind. But from where we're starting, it's like, so what are the things I can commit to in terms of changing myself, in terms of improving myself? And they kind of build this muscle. It's like a muscle that we develop through vows. And I think this is something that in modern times is really overlooked, especially with young people, because I think that's probably the thing that our generation is probably the scared of the most, is actually commitment. Like, we don't want to commit to anything. As long as we can kind of just like go through life and not commit, that's pretty good. So pretty much only marker now, I think, of any serious real commitment is marriage. I mean, like a job is kind of like, I'm in a job because, I'm kind of here, but you're kind of out. There's not very much sense of commitment nowadays. I mean, there's commitment to family, kind of you got born into a family, so you really had no choice, So I would say the marriage vows now are the only kind of marker of some commitment that I think people still take more seriously. So when I first explain monastic vows, like becoming a monk, I say,
wait, there's commitment to non-commitment.
There's commitment to non-commitment. That's true. They don't quite know that, but they're generally trying to avoid. I can see myself not wanting to commit to something because of what that might mean. And so, in terms of, so as I was saying, so for me to relate to my friends, I explain, well, what I'm doing actually is kind of like the closest I think they can relate to is like marriage vows. This is something I take very seriously. I'm committing for life to. And actually, in the Mahayana vision of the Dharma, actually many of the vows that we commit to as a monastic in the Bodhisattva precepts, for instance, are actually, you take those vows until you realize Buddhahood. So they're lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And how it's described is that if you're in this life, after we pass away, these vows still carry us. In the next life, we'll meet these vows again, and we can retake them and renew them and kind of have this process. So there's kind of that vision. But at least for this life, as a monk, there's a commitment, say, this is what I'm going to hold to for a lifetime. And my experience with monastic life, because I would say that's for me probably the closest I've come to a really serious vow was, and I don't know what exactly the seeds are. If now, given my background in Buddhism, there's probably some past vows involved. But before, when I was not, Buddhist, quote unquote, or understood Buddhism, in say the Christian tradition, it's kind of like a calling by God. It's like a vocation. You're called to something. And so for me, in the early process of being interested in a kind of monastic form, I framed it in my mind almost like a calling, like a vocation that one follows. But now as I look at it, it's something that was extremely deep in my mind that I couldn't really explain rationally almost. Like, why would I like to want to choose this path? Something else was carrying me. And it's something that I felt this is what I have to do with myself, regardless of whatever's happening in the world, whatever the external is. And I didn't understand it at all, what it meant in the beginning. And so I made a lot of mistakes, but I had that vow carrying me through each of my mistakes. And I would learn from it, but it kept allowing me to get through what was difficult. Even when we went through the recent training, when I had, it wasn't like a big doubt, but I had at one moment I thought, well, what am I doing? And then there's this really deep sense is, this is what you're supposed to do. This is your aspiration. And it was just like, it was just really clear. And I just like, and it was like, so there's some force behind it that I can't really explain with vows. My experience with this particular vow is that it carries some energy that goes beyond my rational process. It goes beyond my own feelings of comfort, of like or dislike, of like, oh, because the monastic form is something that suits me or something. It doesn't have that feeling. It's something that's like, it's like a laser beam almost. It's like, the analogy of a boat I think is really good. It's like something that carries me, and I can rely on it going through this process. And so I think that to me is something that, just given that we just recently went through the ordination process, is something that's still fresh in my mind, was that we just committed to this path in this life, and we have that fresh in our minds, and it's like this is what we're going to try to do to the best of our ability. And I know for sure we're going to make a lot of mistakes in the process, but what I really like about Buddhism is that it doesn't expect perfection, especially in the beginning. The vow is that you stick with it, and you keep working with it, and you don't retreat from it. Just keep working, and at one point you'll be like the Bodhisattva, and you don't even have the thought of retreat. You don't even have a thought of, making mistakes, because you've purified your mind to a point that you're liberated. But in this process of purification and working through, these vows help us through this process. So that's like my experience of it on a very much more day-to-day level. And so I really encourage, the young people who come, or even people who come and volunteer at the City of 10,000 Buddhas, oftentimes say, really think about it, what vows you want to make in your life. Because my experience here at the City of 10,000 Buddhas is, if you make those vows, something about the Dharma will help you, support you in those vows. If you don't have those vows, the energy it's a support, almost like doesn't have a place to go. But once you make that direction, I'm amazed at the energy and spiritual support that just comes from nowhere and supports you. And so really think about it. So it's not something you take lightly. It's something that just really reflect on. And when you're meditating, ask that question: what are my vows? Why am I doing this? What's my highest aspiration? Forget everything else. Just what is it? And write it down. And remind yourself, over and over, this is where I'm going. This is what I'm doing. So, and that's what the Bodhisattvas did. And that's how they realized what they realized. Yes. Okay, for sure.
hopefully I can articulate what I'm trying to say. You emphasize vigor and non-retreating as for us people as individuals.
Sorry?
You emphasized the idea of non-retreating.
Yes.
And, in terms of pains in the body and afflictions in the mind and laziness, etc. But we're talking about bodhisattvas on the fifth ground here. I mean, lifetimes ago, they have left these kinds of things, and their minds and bodies are so purified that these sorts of vigors and non-retreating attitudes that you mentioned really don't apply to them. And yet, this paragraph talks about non-retreating. And my impression from reading it is that what would they be retreating from? To me, they would be retreating, if they had the thought of retreating, of the difficulty of transforming living beings, teaching and transforming. They don't have to worry about laziness or pains in their legs or getting up early or going to sleep, right? This is the fifth ground after all. So I wish you would have emphasized that more, because when I think about the world the way it is and the promiscuity and everything going to hell, I sort of give up on the whole matter. But bodhisattvas don't, and that's what the non-retreating is about here, not being rigorous on a personal level. And I wanted to make that comment because I think you should have emphasized that more. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, that's a very good point. He does not retreat from his vows, basically. And while I cannot claim to understand what a bodhisattva on the fifth ground actually thinks or feels, or the obstacles that he goes through, what I do know is that even on the fifth ground, his mind still has defilements. And that's why he needs to purify, it says on the third sentence, because he's good at purifying deep mindsets. So although he's at the fifth ground, he is still only at the fifth ground, if you could also see it that way. So as he progresses along, as he's purifying his mind deeper and deeper, that also means that as he purifies his mind, he can also see his past habitual seeds coming up as well. So if you could say from an issue of relativeness, he is kind of like us, although it would be more subtle for him. He may not have to deal with cause emotions like having to rouse himself up in terms of vigor, but that's also because he has the power of the vows to sustain him. And like you said, I think that's the point of this paragraph. But also, he still has to work at his cultivation. And he still has a long way to go before Buddhahood. Yeah. But definitely, he's at a very different level from common people, but the principles apply to him just as much as applies to us. Yeah, I would say that. Does that answer your question? Does that? So that's how I would choose to. Does that answer your question? Or do you still have? Okay,
what I'm talking about is, like, for example, in the Earth Store Sutra, I think, I forget what it is. Someone asked Bodhisattva, after all his vigor in trying to cross over living beings, many of us, most of us are really, not being crossed over. And he says, well, they keep going back, but he doesn't give up on them. That's what the vigor is here of a bodhisattva.
Yeah. Not
giving up on living beings. Okay, I mean, when we look at the world with climate change and everything is falling apart. I get demoralized. But a bodhisattva doesn't, and that is the more important to me than the vigor on a bodily and mental level, because they're far beyond the four marks at this point, aren't they? No, self and other. That's what I believe, anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, you say that this is only on the fifth ground. I mean, only compared to a Buddha, but I mean, compared to us, that's, I mean, they're in an inconceivable state, the fifth level bodhisattva.
Yeah,
Anyway,
think
that's what I wanted to express.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned that, because thanks to you, I just gained a fresh perspective on this that I otherwise would not have. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good principle in terms of what the bodhisattva is actually doing. Is for sure they're much higher than what we're experiencing, and what they're experiencing in terms of practice and what they're trying to do. It's definitely not kind of the day-to-day experience that we have in our cultivation. But I guess for myself, it's a sense of relating it to where I'm at in my process and understanding it, so how we can make it relevant for what we're doing right now. So, but yeah, having that vision also is really encouraging as well for the bodhisattva's heart, because sometimes there's a sense of, wow, this is really difficult. This world is not in a good shape. But you know that there's these bodhisattvas who are around supporting at a really profound level at all times. We just had the Earth Store session at the Satan Thousand Buddhas, so we just read the sutra a number of times. And knowing there's Earth Store Bodhisattva, if people aren't familiar with him, he's the bodhisattva who made vows to stay in the ground until the hells are empty. So he doesn't even give up on living beings who are in the hells, which are supposed to be, much worse than even this current state in our affairs in this world now. So, yes. As in, as you. What? As in, can you make a vow, but you don't know how that vow will come to fruition? Yeah. How we'll get there. Can you do that? From my experience, yes. I think that's my experience is sometimes I don't know how the vow will actually be realized, but once I have that aspiration, somehow the pieces come together. It's like the vow works beyond a rational process of being able to see every step of the path and then getting there. Like, for instance, even just being a monastic was very much not having any idea how to get there, other than I had this real strong aspiration. But I think for many things I see the bodhisattvas make these vows to save all living beings. When we make these vows to save all living beings, what we really look at is, how are we going to do that? Well, it's not easy. But then you really work hard, and you see that in the previous ground, the bodhisattva really studies hard because he wants to rescue living beings. So then he goes and makes it a point to learn how to do it. So that vow guides you. So maybe you first have to have that vow, which will then motivate you and can guide you in the process.
First, I would qualify that ... to be a wholesome vow. So what I understand from the sutras are that all the vows that are actually made, the first vows are made by people who are just normal people, people like myself, people like some of you here. And when they make that vows, they don't really, my understanding is that they don't know how the vows will turn out. But they make the vow because their heart at that moment expands. And that's why they can make such far-reaching vows. And I guess that's how the mechanism or the power of vows work. Because not only plants the seed, but it then carries you towards your next, or it sets the frame for your future thoughts from that moment on, and the activities that you undertake. So I would say yes. The sutras do speak of just Earth-Store Bodhisattva, Amitabha Buddha. When they make all their vows, Ananda, Venerable Ananda, when they made all their vows, it's always at a point where all they have to rely on is their heart at that time. Yeah, so I would say yes.
How many Buddhas are there?
That's a trick question.
How many Buddhas are there?
again, I would answer from the point of the sutras. And what I have read is that in this very text that we have before us, the Avatamsaka Sutra, it describes Buddhas. They use the analogy of sand grains in Ganges rivers. So what they do is, because the number cannot be comprehended by our normal mind, so the analogy they use is, say imagine if every sand grain in the Ganges rivers had in that grain another Ganges rivers with that many sand grains. And then in every sand grain of that sand grain in that Ganges river, there was another Ganges river with a number of sand grains. So it's like you multiply that by infinity, and that's the number of Buddhas that exist. Yeah, because what we are speaking about is it's a state where the mind that we use to think does not have the scope to deal with. So they use that analogy basically to break down the barriers that we have in our minds that we create. Say if you are growing up in a Christian background, you would come with your own narrative and you would interpret the sutra through that narrative. I came from a kind of like a almost atheist background when I grew up. It was like kind of like a confused Taoist, pseudo-Buddhist kind of thing, with a bit of Sai Baba thrown in because of my mom, until I was maybe about 10 years old when she encountered the Dharma and the Brahma Master. So I have my own narrative that I bring. So it all depends on where you come from. So the sutra, what it does is it tries to break down all the narratives that you bring in either judging or interpreting the sutra, and it tells you, hey, this is something that is beyond what the normal mind can do. If you want to find out, you have to cultivate and bring your mind to a point that is still enough, and then you can access your own wisdom and find out for yourself exactly how many Buddhas there are, or how many sands there are in the Ganges rivers. Yeah.
I think maybe our evening time is here. I don't know if there's any last questions or announcements. There's anything coming up?
Or any perspectives that you would like to share
We have
that we can learn from as well?
Let's see, next week we will have a normal Saturday here. The cooks from Canada, not cooks from Canada, our Berkeley community cooks are returning from Canada.
Yeah, monks have cooks that we bring in from Canada just to cook for us.
There's a whole team who are really sincere and make offerings every Saturday, but they went up because as people know, Gold Buddha Monastery recently had an opening light ceremony, so they opened the monastery there, and a whole troop of something like 27 Berkeley Monastery community people went up to CDB. One of the laymen from the city, or just drove down, he said he went up there, and it was just like going up there and seeing CDB again, because all the people at CDB were in Canada. So they'll be returning for next week. So next week we'll have the usual activities. So the people who maybe missed out the last 2 weeks will have it again. Oh, yeah. I'm guessing maybe it's something with UC Berkeley starting, or the new school year. But we have the daily practices here. So the monastery actually has an open times for meditation every day. And that's a really valuable resource if you have any interest in meditation. We start from in the mornings at 6:15 to 7:15 a.m. And if you can come in a little bit, if you're late, it's no problem. We won't lock the door. So you can come in and get sit. And basically this space is open for people to meditate. And also in the afternoons from 5:15 to 6:15, we have an evening sit. And so that's every single day, rain or shine, pretty much. We have on Friday nights is a lecture by Dr. Martin Verhoeven, and he's explaining a Chan meditation text, or you can say a Zen text, which explains the kind of practical aspects of cultivating Chan meditation. And so that's we've been doing that for almost like a year now, going through the text, and it's written by a highly accomplished Chan master. And so that's a really good time to come. We first start with 45 minutes meditation in that class, followed from 8:15 to 9 o'clock the actual lecture. So if you have a chance to come to that, that's really recommended. What else we have?
We have a full list of the classes that we hold here every week, and it's on the notice board outside. And this coming Saturday, what we usually have on the Saturday is we have a ceremony at 9 o'clock in the morning. There's either the Great Compassion Repentance or the Universal Door chapter, both of which have Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva or Kuan Yin as a central figure. And you're most welcome to join. And then at 10:30, we have a public lunch that's cooked by our special cooks from Canada. It's all vegan. It's really wholesome, and it's really, really tasty. So if you want a really wholesome, tasty lunch, please come on Saturdays by 10:30. Everyone is welcome. We have a lot of people here. We have a good community, and you can come and just lend your wholesomeness to the group.
Round table?
We have Chan round table every 2 weeks. We just had one last Thursday. So this Thursday we will not be having a round table. So we will have a round table next Thursday. It's a really nice activity where we usually people of young heart
younger age, younger heart.
We sit in a circle, because everyone's younger than me. So we sit in a circle, and then we meditate for about half an hour, and then we introduce a topic. Someone usually would like to discuss something. It could be a current event. Last week, the event was how to deal with the loss of a loved one and how to deal with difficult co-workers. And we go around and everyone says something, and we try to have some snacks like popcorn. It started out 3 years ago as a potluck. When you come, you bring a snack. That has evolved to me preparing popcorn for everyone at the end of the session. So if you're all hearing this, it's supposed to be a potluck. It starts at 7:30.
Yeah,
it starts at 7:30, and on the same day, we have another group that uses the Buddha hall. So when you come in, just go down the corridor to the dining hall. And that's where the real fun is on Thursday.
Are we missing anything? Angela? Okay, Thursday, September 19th is the next roundtable. So people can, if they have young people they know, want to send them to that, that's a really good place to go. And
it's really fun.
Friendly discussion around some principle.
Not like this.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
Well, this is fun too.
For you, not for them.
Yeah.
Yes, very open dialogue. Yes, Father.
So who should they talk to? Or okay, if they're more interested in a newsletter of our events, please talk to Angela, who's just raising her hand right now.
And she will send you lots of spam email.
No,
come to
no spam. We have hardly any mail.
Berkeley Buddhist Monastery. Make vows. Only once a month.
One email a month.
Come and make a vow at the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery. So I just wanted to revisit the concept of vows. Also more for myself in my understanding. So perhaps if you have a practice that you do, if you meditate, or if you try to send out good wishes, or some people I know, they try to do a good deed every day. So what happens is the vow frames the intention of why you do that practice that you do. So the next time you do it, it could be, I'm doing this on behalf of my friend who is not feeling well and I want her to feel better. You could be doing it on behalf of world peace. You want everyone to have peace, no matter where they are. Or you want to do it so that all world wars will end, no more wars. It all depends on your heart and how you want to benefit people. It's preferably to benefit people.
And that connects very well with what we're doing next, which is dedication of merit. So you can then make a vow from being able to be here in the monastery and learn together the sutra, open the sutra and read something very wholesome, and take that and give it away to whatever you wish to give it to, as Jinghua said, world peace, to your mother, to the well-being of all living beings.
I'll be sending out to my mom and to all moms. May they always enjoy good health.
Okay, so it's the back of your Dharma request sheet. Okay. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. So we can stand and bow to the Buddhas. Respect to the Venerable Master.